Oh yeah, I wanted to say that this whole thing of having to do introductions is just another thing. But yeah, let me just welcome everybody as quickly. Welcome to another episode of The Human in Me. You are here with your boy Mpomo Swashe, and I am here with Ndamulelo, obviously.
I'm here.
So you can hear him. So today we'll be doing it's the third episode, ne?
Yep.
Yeah,
Third
so
episode.
today we'll be doing the third episode, and as we promised you the last time, we'll basically be focusing on looking at ways in which we can reprogram ourselves to our childhood experiences. So, yeah, that's basically what we're doing today. Just taking you through a rundown on how we can go about the reprogramming thing. So, okay.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say this is gonna be part one of reprogramming.
Oh shit, there's gonna be a part two.
Yeah.
Okay, plus there's just so many things we can talk about with regards to that. Because of time, obviously, we can't record this thing for like 2 hours. It just needs to be, within a short space of time.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like we're still considering the fact that not everyone has the luxury of sitting there listening to a 1 hour podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's another thing. Okay, so the reprogramming thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing here is that
Wait, before we get into it, I think.
oh, okay,
Yeah, because well, it's similar to being in the journey of self-development, right? Because reprogramming has to do with self-development for your sake,
yeah.
and the improvements are noticed by you, which is more focused on self-control than anything else, which is what the Buddhists describe as true power,
Mm-hmm.
and what Epictetus in his um, book um, called true control, in terms of it's controlling the variables that you're in total control of.
Which is basically your actions.
Yeah. So the disclaimer has to do with how you feel in terms of where you are in the journey. Yeah. So don't panic, because
Yeah.
sometimes you get to a point where you feel lost and you feel like you're not going anywhere.
Yo, dude. Yeah, I remember that part when
Yeah.
I. Another thing that makes the whole thing quite difficult is that, especially when you get to the part where you get lost, is that there's literally no one that you can ask when
That's
you're
true.
on your journey of personal development, because it's usually an individual thing. It's not something that we go through as a group with our friends and all that. So you kind of get to a point where you get lost and you don't know where you are going or what's going. Like you just get lost. You don't know what to do from then on. But what I realized on my journey was that when I got to a point where I kind of got lost, I obviously I started reading more so that I can find the answer. Because that's basically the reason why I've been on this personal development thing. It's because I'm looking for answers. I'm trying to understand myself, which for me basically started with trying to understand why people did the things they did when I was still growing up. I mean, like obviously we all have the misfortunes in our lives where people, treated us like shit when
Mm-hmm.
we were still growing up. So I have my fair share of that, and I've always wondered why people treated me the way they did, and that's how my interest in this whole thing began, which is the reason why I at first wanted to study psychology until I was told that nah, psychology there's no money there. So I had to take my life on a different path. I had to take my life on a different path, but I'm back at it again. I've been busy with it. So going back to the insecurities part. So this is the thing with insecurities, which is basically the reason why we're doing this podcast. Not necessarily insecurities in themselves, but the reprogramming part, because insecurities are one of the few things that are easily distinguishable.
Yep.
Because for the most part, we go throughout the day trying to protect ourselves from the things that happen, in the world, and the easiest way to actually see that there's something that you might need to work on within yourself is when you focus on insecurities.
It's true.
So, um, yeah, and then oh, one thing that I came to realize about, okay, let me just give out an example of one insecurity that I've come to realize. So, well, obviously, the origin of insecurities comes from our childhood, where we are constantly being ridiculed for the way we are,
That's true.
you know. And as you go, obviously, that's not the only way they manifest, but that's like the easiest way to explain this. So, you constantly being ridiculed when you are still growing up, and for you to protect yourself, it's either, well, obviously, when we are still young, we don't know much, we don't know better in terms of realizing that, sometimes it's your actions that need to be controlled other than controlling the circumstances in your world. So as a child,
Exactly.
obviously, as people do that to you or treat you in a certain way, you tend to retaliate, and that retaliation obviously happens more often than we realize, and it ends up becoming a part of who we are. We end up getting to a point where we just like, this is how I handle things, this is who I am, this is just how I am, you know and the problem with that is that there's just other situations that happen where you end up blowing things way, way out of proportion, in terms of, when your insecurities are basically evoked in a way, you
Exactly.
know. Yeah, so well, I realized that I'm getting off track.
No,
Yeah.
it's you're definitely on track.
Okay, because I wanted to use an example, but I keep on explaining what insecurities are all about. Okay, yeah, I was on the right track though. Okay, so yeah, so for the most part, we go through life trying to protect ourselves from those people, and the manner in which we are doing that is basically the thing that kind of gets us blowing things, like blowing things out of proportion in
That's
certain
true.
situations. Like for example, if you have, your own, you have a bodily insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
and someone, or maybe your child, because children can say things that, literally hit you at the core, but the sad part is that they don't know, better. That's why they just go on.
And
So
it's just blunt.
if exactly, if it happens that, a child, touches on one of your insecurities, like maybe they tell you about your bodily
Ooh.
part that you kind of feel insecure about. I mean, like, I've seen people beating up their children, and when you ask them, why are you doing that, they would usually say that, nah, this child is naughty, the child is naughty. But the thing that I usually ask such individuals, obviously I've never asked anyone that question, especially one who's beating their child, but one thing that I usually do to help people realize that sometimes, or to a certain degree, they need to work on their stuff, is that I usually ask, why does that thing make you feel a certain way? Okay, so I usually ask people, why does that particular thing make them feel that certain way? And the reason why I'm saying that is because sometimes you'll realize that when something happens and then you react a certain way to it, the thing that you need to ask is, why, obviously, why do you react to it that way? And obviously the answer would usually be, oh, this person just made me angry. But why, what is it in what this person just did that makes you angry?
Yeah.
So if you kind of keep on going back asking the why question, it kind of gets to a point where you realize that, oh shit, this thing that's happening right now is just me reacting to a present situation, in terms of, it's basically me trying to protect myself from what happened back then, but I'm using these situations to actually try to, which is
Yeah, because I've
basically
seen it before.
exactly, and it's fucking scary when you think about it. I remember there was this other time when I was we were basically walking inside this other girl's room now. And what happened is that, this thing is funny. What happened is that we didn't even stay long. She ended up kicking us out of her room, and she was like, "No, guys, I don't want you to see how messy my room is." And I'm like, "Dude, we just fucking walked inside your room, and it looks perfectly clean. Why do you feel like there's something wrong?" "No, I'm just worried there could be something wrong with my room. And I was like, that right there is an insecurity. And if she doesn't realize that that is an insecurity, that thing is just gonna fuck up her thing, because she's gonna meet friends who are basically gonna, be offended by that, and that's just gonna fuck up, the relationships.
Yeah.
Honestly,
'Cause they may take it for something else that it's not.
exactly, they may take it for something else that it's not. So it's very important for you to always, like, I'm saying this always. When I say always, I don't mean to say that when you realize that you have a certain insecurity, you should, jump into it and work on it immediately. The thing that I usually say is that, because there are so many things that happened, so the thing that you can do is that every time you see one of your insecurities manifesting themselves, or you can just question every fucking behavior, that you project to the
That's
world.
true.
And always, if something makes you feel like something makes you happy,
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself, why does it make you feel happy? You'll realize that it's connected to something back in your past. When something makes you angry, when something makes you sad, like, most of the things that basically touch on your emotions, because we can't go through like throughout the day without feeling
Exactly.
emotions. So most of the things that tap on your emotions, you have to ask yourself, why do I respond the way I'm responding to this? And if you keep on asking that, you'll understand how you came to like the good things in your life and how you came to hate the bad things in your life. That, in my opinion, is basically the beginning of your own personal development journey. Because
Damn.
if you can realize what makes you tick, and what kind of gives you a smile, and what makes you happy, and what makes you mad, what makes you sad, if people do things that make you feel that way, you are less likely to react to those things,
Damn.
because like, okay, I know why I'm basically responding like that to this thing. So even when they do things that you don't necessarily like, you'll always remember that I need to pull myself back because I'm blowing this thing out of proportion.
True. That's true self-knowledge in depth, eh?
Yo, dude.
Yeah, and the thing that, stood out the most for me when you were talking was how, for me, it's always been easier to reflect on negative emotions because they are the most prominent and they resonate with you for a longer period of time. But as for the happy ones, we tend to just enjoy them
Yeah,
and forget to reflect on them.
that's true.
So I think that's like knowing yourself on an in-depth level. And to go back and quote from Epictetus' book, The Enchiridion of Epictetus, he talks about how one is in the development of his, one is in the journey of his self-development, right? And at the first part, he realizes the blame, or for a situation or an instance that happens, he realizes the part of the blame within himself. And as for the second part, he realizes the part of the blame within himself and others, right? And as for the third part, he realizes the part of the blame as neither of himself or others. And I wanted to say that just to um, for you to remember and give you hope in your journey when you get confused, because it's one of the benefits that comes with self-development, right? Because one thing that I remember when it comes to insecurities and dealing with them is when, as a kid, when most people made you feel insecure, there's a realization or a thought you come to, and you think to yourself, who do you think you are to do this to me, right? It's like, what gives you the right? And it's like most people, which is linked to the three parts of development. Most people are purely doing it out of being social and their natural responses, and as social beings, that to you get the question, what do you think your value is in relation to me that you could treat me so lowly, right? But for them, it's more of a reaction to their own insecurities.
Yeah.
So they're brushing them off, right? So that's what you get when you've gotten to the highest level of development, and you blame no one, right? Because you realize that they don't do it because they don't do it because it's them. They do it because they're social creatures, and that's how they respond to insecurities. Or else, if you were still in, let's say, level 2, you would realize, oh, they're doing this because I'm showing insecurity, and basically showing insecurity makes the other person more of a predator,
Yeah.
and that's how they respond to you,
Mm-mm.
right?
And another thing that I wanted to add on to what you said is that, okay, specifically what you said when you said that, yeah, when you say that, obviously people are just, okay, where does one get the right to treat you that
Exactly.
way, right? And what I wanted to add to that is the fact that, another thing that we have to realize is that, as we are still growing up, what usually happens is that we go into the outside world and then we compare the outside world with what we've been taught at home.
That's
Young child.
true.
So even in terms of what's wrong and what's right will be determined by what is viewed as right or wrong in your environment. Young child. So sometimes when people do certain things, right? I mean, like I'm pretty much sure you can even see this thing with young kids. You can ridicule a young child like 2 years, 3 years. You can try to ridicule them, right? But for them, obviously, if you ridicule them on things that are physical, they can see, they're gonna get touched, obviously. But if you do it on things that they cannot see, they're just gonna be surprised. What the fuck are you talking about? Young child. It's because they haven't grown up to a point where they can differentiate between someone just saying something and someone saying something with the intention to, to put you at a particular
That's
at a
true.
particular stage. So even there, the realization that what gives someone the right to do that comes from what you what you came to internalize from what you were taught back home. It's the same thing as like people when people look at Chinese people eat dogs, right? When someone looks at a person, okay, for me personally, when I heard that Chinese people eat dogs, it surprised me. I couldn't understand how anyone in the right state of mind could potentially eat a dog, because I don't see a dog as something that you can eat. Being told, but for me, I don't react to that angrily. But if you were to take someone who knows something about animal rights,
Yeah, and as a humanitarian.
exactly, they would lose their
And
cool as soon as they
exactly.
realize that, oh shit, this person. So you can see even the way you react to things, it's just your expectations are not being met by circumstances.
That's true.
And it's just you reacting in certain ways to them. It's just you saying, oh shit, something just knocked out, just got knocked out of control, so I need to bring it back. Right, all. So most of the things just it kind of goes back to your interpretation of things.
That's true.
But at the very same time, I just wanna make you realize that at this stage, I'm pretty much sure people who listen to this podcast are actually old. Did you know that we had one person from India listen to our podcast?
Damn, that's interesting.
Exactly, that's fucking interesting. So, okay, so I'm sorry
So
about
you're
that.
giving a shout out to all the
Indian people,
to come.
and this person is literally from India, bruh. I
That's
was like,
interesting.
wow. Okay, so moving on. So the thing, okay, now the thing is that at this stage, the people who are listening to this podcast are already, like in their 20s, So, their insecurities are already there. Being told. But the one thing that I want them to realize is that at the very same, while you are busy working on your insecurities, right, you still need to realize that despite the fact that at the end of the day you feel like people treated you unjustly, you have to come back and remind yourself that my interpretation of that needs to be put into
Exactly.
consideration when I consider, how can you treat me like that?
Exactly.
So you need to put your own interpretation into the whole thing and be like, okay, now I understand this is how I interpret it. Obviously, you know that this person did that thing with the intention of hating. I mean, I've seen that. People, there was this other guy who literally got me beaten. You still remember that supermarket called Score?
Okay.
Yeah, this nigga literally encouraged me to go and steal something inside Score. And after I was beating him up, that motherfucker was laughing at me for stealing. And so with that one, I understand. He did that intentionally because he knew that I was gonna get fucked, you know. But but at this where I am right now, I'm just like, I understand that nigga was just a child. He didn't know better. I'm pretty much sure if he knew better, he would have understood the implications of that, you know. So that's why I'm saying that you also need to put your interpretation of situations into consideration. It's very, very helpful for you to do that because when you realize how the things that people have done to you affected you, you are less likely to react with anger towards them.
Yeah.
Because now you realize, okay, they were just being human beings, so it's not a biggie.
All right. To add on to, I like how my man here jumped into the the example I used and the realization that usually comes with insecurity, and it made me realize that this is part one, right? And basically, well, what I'm gonna explain now is gonna have to do more with part two, but it's just gonna scratch the surface of part two, and it has to do with, right, when we're talking about insecurities, it directly affects the ego, right? Because the ego is the source of all insecurity and security within a human being. And to bring in all the books I'm currently studying right now, okay, first I'll borrow from the Enchiridion of Epictetus. And basically, it's what my man here has been saying about judgments. And in the book, Epictetus goes on to say that you will only be offended by the definition of your judgment, right? The man has not offended you, it is your judgment that makes you.
Exactly.
Basically, it's the meaning that you attach to what has been done to you as being done to you.
Can I add something quickly?
All right.
With regards to what you just said. And another thing that you have to realize is that at the time when people were doing all that stuff, you were just a child. You couldn't have, known better.
That's true.
I think I've already explained this thing. So yeah, continue.
Yeah. So basically, the other thing is has to do with, like I said, insecurities are directly influence the ego, right? And I think when I gave the example and the realization, my man here got the judgment interpretation, right? But basically what I was trying to explain was the ego part, right?
Yeah.
Because basically that's at the essence of that thought or realization. That's your ego speaking, right? That's me in relation to everybody else, because that's what the ego does. It's the I, right? And for you to be someone, there has to be someone else to refer you from the other person, right?
Yeah.
So basically, it's more of the value you put within yourself, because your ego, right? Your ego. It's why Napoleon Hill says, when it comes to your ego, build a wall so high above it that no one can reach your ego, right? Your ego is where your self-esteem and self-confidence are. Or it's like at the root. It's basically, that's part of your ego.
Yeah, I like what you just said, because when you were talking about the ego, right, I wanted to interrupt you, but for some reason I was like, let me just relax. Kancane. So the typical example in which I usually see people's ego playing a part is when people try to show just how intelligent they are. Young tall. So that's just another thing that basically comes from certain insecurities.
Yeah, it's basically a show of insecurity.
Yeah, it's a show of insecurity.
And to explain what I mean, basically, it's like your intelligence, right? It always has to do with your value, your perceived value. Right?
Exactly.
Your perceived value in regards to others, right? Because the ego is basically the entity that you form yourself, right? It's kind of like your ego is basically the primary. I don't know what words to use. Okay, let me just call it an entity.
Basic English, my man. Basic English.
Okay, it's the primary concept of yourself that you form first before anything else,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it has different ways of responding to different things, right? And if these responses indicate that it is not, these responses, right, they indicate that it is not secure or secure, right? And basically, you have to realize that for every situation, right,
Mm-hmm.
since you are, well, hopefully an adult, right, and you're past 18, you have to realize that there's already attached responses, and there's already an attached value to your ego, and you already have insecurities and ways of responding to certain situations, right?
Yeah.
And as an adult, right, this is the depth of what I'm trying to bring out, right? Because it's the depth of what I'm trying to bring out, right? Your ego is at a certain level. It has to do with you being present and true to yourself. Your ego is at a certain level, right? And at the first level of development, you become conscious of where you are and how your programming became to be what it is, right? That's conscious, that's reflection, that's contemplating. It's the difference between the how and the doing, right?
Mm.
This is the gap I'm trying to breach by explaining this to you. So basically, you realize that why you're being insecure is because of your judgment. So your ego has already been, it's full, and it has ways of reacting to certain things. What you're trying to do now is to react to certain things in a way that will make your ego secure. Because you don't
Yeah.
have a secure ego at the moment. You're trying to
Yeah.
make it secure by your judgments, right?
Mm.
And basically, to add in another book, it's called As a Man Thinketh. And the man is made of his thoughts, right? So you already have thoughts that and judgments that support your ego at the current moment. And to make your ego more secure, you're going to have to replace these thoughts by other thoughts that will make you respond to situations as a person who values themselves more than just what was programmed to you by others, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to get to you is the fact that your ego has a certain type of programming. And in the process of you making your ego more secure, you have to realize that these instances that make you feel insecure are still going to make you feel insecure, but you're going to have to use your thoughts and new judgments that you implement and hold them.
Exactly. It's more like catching yourself in the act. You know, when somebody does something and then you are about to react, that's when you have to literally because that's the thing that I usually tell people, that when you start to become aware of what's going on under the radar, that's with the moment you become aware of what's going on under the radar, it kind of gives you enough power to realize when those those insecurities are being tapped on, so that way you are able to stop yourself before you react to them. So that's like the most beautiful thing about this thing, like about you being aware of what's going on under the radar. Is that you come to realize that there's literally no need for you to react the way you've been reacting to situations, because even when you think about it, the people that you talk to don't know where you've been to, where you come from.
That's true.
The only thing they know is what they see in front of them.
That's true.
So they can't even know how you how even with you being abused. No one walks around with a tag that says, I've been abused. It's only after they have a conversation with you that they come to realize, oh shit, so this is what happened to this person. So even with those things that make you react to certain things, you always have to bring yourself back and be like, these people who are standing in front of me don't know where I've been through. So it kind of helps in a way.
That's true.
It helps.
All right.
So and I like like with what you just mentioned, when I was listening to you, I kind of realized that well, you did say that you're basically putting into this conversation something that relates to part 2. And when you were explaining that, I was like, shit, this guy is literally talking about part 2 of the podcast, because like I said before we started this whole thing, okay, like I said before we started this whole thing, we have to try to keep things at a basic level.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm bringing it up, so that
That's
when whoever is listening to this thing and is starting to get confused, they can always
That's
come back
true.
and be like, oh yeah, shit, he did say that this is part 2 of the thing. And another thing that I wanted to bring onto the table is I think we said everything. But another example that I wanted to bring onto the table is people who have anger management issues. I think
That's
you
interesting.
know. Well, the thing is that when you go back, like in the townships, right, you come across such individuals, and what they would tell you to explain their irrational behaviors is that they would really tell you that, oh yeah, this is who I am, I don't take shit from no one, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, my nigga, you need to relax. You need to ask yourself where that, like I've been saying, like this is like the 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 remedy for everything when you're on your journey of personal development. It kind of gets, the moment you start asking yourself the question why, you have everything laid down on the table. You are basically questioning every
That's
single
true.
aspect of your life. The moment you're saying why, and if you can get to that, it makes it easy for you to want to seek answers. The same way that I do, I have so many questions. I used to have so many questions about myself, but when I go on reading books, trying to make sense of who I've become, it the question why makes it easy for me, because I can always be like, okay, I understand that. Okay, for example, you still remember last week when we were in that other room,
Yeah.
and then you dropped something on the table, and I told you that I always, threw
Yeah.
a slap at you.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that so my friend here dropped like, what do you call this thing?
Yeah, the base of the
The
microphone
microphone stand, right?
Yeah.
So the base of the microphone stand is literally metal. So when this thing falls on the table, it makes that loud bang noise. So because for some reason I grew up in an environment where, when people get angry or when people fight, they used to bang things around. So it's, I don't want to call it a post-traumatic post.
Yeah,
I don't have
it's a
PTSD.
trigger, basically.
It's a trigger. I don't have PTSD, even if I had, but I don't have PTSD.
I think you do.
No, no, I don't have PTSD. Come on, bro. So the thing is that every time I hear something gets banged, someone banging a door, or especially when it happens unexpectedly, my initial reaction to that is literally anger. Like I'm already ticked and I'm already angry at whoever just did that, right? But because I'm aware of where this is coming from, I'm able to be like, okay, nah, it's fine, it's fine. Nothing. This person just banged the door by mistake. The same way that we all do, Sometimes the door just
That's
comes.
where the judgment comes in.
Exactly, that's where the judgment comes in. But the anger part of things
Exactly.
is basically just,
It's the natural reaction.
it's you see, it's how I've, okay,
Yeah.
it's my natural reaction to things that get banged. But the ultimate reaction, like the ultimate action of me approaching someone and be like, hey, why are you banging things on the floor, blah blah blah, is the thing that I'm trying to prevent, which is
Exactly.
basically the thing with people who claim to have anger management issues. I don't take such individuals serious. But that's basically why we're doing the podcast, so that you can learn about such things.
Hey, you shouldn't say that. What if someone has anger management and they're listening to this?
Oh yeah, fuck. No, but they can understand fit. Okay, but at least they're learning. So the thing,
Yeah,
that's the
this
thing.
is-
Like, you have to keep on asking yourself, where is this coming from? Why do I feel the need to react the way I'm reacting to certain things? And you'll come to realize sometimes it's just a protective mechanism that you use to shield yourself from certain things. There's
true.
nothing wrong with it. The most important thing that we wanted you to, that we personally, from the bottom of our hearts, is for you to understand where it's all coming from. Because when you are angry, or when something makes you angry, and you fail to judge that in terms, use judgment, you end up killing people,
That's true.
and that's fucked up.
Yeah, you
know-
shouldn't let it get to that level.
Exactly, which is why we're saying at this stage, if you are a person who's got anger management issues, work on that thing. If you are a person who's got bodily insecurities, the moment somebody, it's the same thing as when you know that you have love handles, for example. The moment somebody starts talking about your love handles, maybe they want to tell you that, I used a certain product. But the moment they say, love handles, you end up, you jump.
Hey, maybe you should try incorporating a judgment that sees love handles positively.
You
As long as it's not a means to escape.
Exactly. You see, as long as it's not a means to escape.
Because there's escape in everything.
Exactly. So people are going to say things that are literally gonna tap on off on your insecurities, even though you don't use the ultimate act of being all reactionary and stuff. But the moment you start realizing something is making you feel a certain way, you just have to ask yourself, why do I act the way I do to this particular thing? If you
That's
continue
true.
on that path, I'm telling you, my brother and sister, you'll be on a path of personal development, and you will be doing far more better than anyone you've ever known in history,
Mhm.
because this is like the part in our lives where um, we are no longer doing things in a cumulative way.
Yeah, we're not sheep just following with the herd of people.
Exactly. Well, obviously, there are disadvantages to you wanting to be your own individual thing, but ultimately, it has its own advantages, and I respect that. Which is basically how people in America are mostly successful. Um, that's true, bruh. Like, the moment you realize that a certain system doesn't work for you, and then you stand up for yourself and be like, you know what, fuck this shit. I'm just gonna go out there and do my own thing. That's how people become successful. Majority of people. I mean, like, you can ask anyone who's successful, they will tell you, I wasn't happy with my background, so I had to do something about it. I mean, like, dude,
Yeah,
that's
I think one thing that would put more extroverted type of people at ease, unlike the introverts who can accommodate spending a long periods of time
oh,
working on their own,
yeah.
is basically all the self-help and self-development groups and communities and
Yeah.
working on it with a friend, and because self-development is like self-development is like it's a work that you do for yourself,
Mm,
and
mm.
if you're not used to working by yourself and you
It
need
makes it
that group
difficult.
spirit,
Yeah.
it will kind of get you to feel lonely, right?
Yeah.
Because you're working on something that benefits you in the long run, right? But the results are not so evident
Yeah.
quickly. And when mostly when you try and do that, and then to the people around you, it seems like too much of a change, too big of a change, right?
Yeah.
You're automatically going to push them away without realizing it.
Yeah.
And so when you've come up and you're a different person, right? You don't want to lose your friends unnecessarily,
That's true.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for bringing extroverts into the whole thing, because yeah, it's very very helpful that because you're basically going into a territory that you're literally not used to,
That's true. It's
and
all
it's going to feel,
introverted, and
yeah, and it's going to feel uncomfortable.
that's true.
It's going
And
to
I
feel
think I think
uncomfortable.
it's as much as it is beneficial for you to be an introvert, but for an extrovert, it's like you're getting 1,000 mentors if you get into a self-help
Yeah.
community. So you have more tools and you feel a lot less alone, and you have more people to relate to, and that's how you grow even quicker, right?
Yeah, and another thing that you can do is basically you can even follow us on Twitter.
Uh-huh.
Our Twitter handle is the Human in Me. You
Uh-huh.
can do the same thing on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
The Human in Me podcast. Yeah, it's the Human in Me podcast.
Uh-huh.
You can also like a page called the Human in Me on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
That's basically where all the fun stuff are happening. We'll
Yeah.
basically be posting stuff to help people who are on a journey of personal development. But the most important part, which is basically why the podcast is called The Human in Me, is then we are basically just trying to show you how the human brain makes sense of the world, or how we as human beings tend to react to certain things, and the things that make us react like that. So if we can understand that, then it kind of makes things a little bit easy for all of us. Because one thing that I usually tell people is that the main thing that we have to understand is that before we are people with personalities, we are human beings.
That's true.
And us being human beings simply means that we all have one brain, we have bodily systems. Like, we're basically the same,
That's true.
as
That's
human
the
beings.
greatest equalizer.
It's the greatest equalizer. So us bringing, the components of the human, like how the human brain, or the human, because everything ultimately boils down to the brain. Every single thing just originates. This
That's
little
true.
thing in our head is basically controlling everything. So if we can understand how the human brain actually makes sense of the world, I mean, like, we are good to go. We are very much good to go. And this is another thing.
Well, I don't think it's the brain as much, because that's the brain is a part of the body, but it comes back to the mind. Because
Yeah.
that's
With the whole thing about the mind is that
it's mind and
we,
brain connection.
we can even start and we can even talk for another 40 minutes on
That's
on
true.
the whole brain and mind thing. But yeah, I don't disagree with you on that one, because one thing that I've come to realize is that you can explain the same thing
Mm-hmm.
using endocrinology in
Yeah,
terms of hormones alone.
that's true.
We can explain something in terms of neuroscience all by itself. You can explain something in terms of psychology all by itself.
That's true.
So you can even explain this thing in terms of
Sociology.
exactly, like there's just, you can even explain it in terms of politics. There's just so many ways to actually go about explaining the same thing. And we are not saying that our way is the ultimate, but we're just saying that
Yeah, that's one good tip. Find a way that works for you, and
find the way that works for you.
that's basically how you're gonna grow quicker than anything else.
Exactly. I know
Try
you
to-
see another thing is that now the only thing we're kind of focusing on is the psyche, and we are
Uh-huh.
putting in a little bit of philosophy.
Mm.
Philosophy is basically, psychology comes from philosophy.
Mhm.
If you go back and try to
That's true.
understand where psychology comes
That's
from,
basically.
so psychology comes from philosophy. So us
Mhm.
putting all those things into
That's true.
this whole thing kind of makes you realize that even though we are explaining this thing, doesn't necessarily mean that they are the ultimate thing. They are just a component, a piece of the whole puzzle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're done though.
Oh yeah.
We've been talking for like 42 minutes.
Okay. So,
So
basically, oh yeah, I also wanted to for more entrepreneurial type oriented people, I wanted to say that a benefit that I got from my self development and the journey, which never ends, which I'm constantly on, is
yeah,
basically the things that pull you through the journey are obsession and passion, right? Basically, if you keep being obsessed about it, even though you think you're in the middle of nowhere, you're just still obsessed, and you do it and do it and do it. Which is basically why people say never give up.
yeah. Just
'Cause
find a
then
reason to
Basically,
yeah.
yeah. Then you'll finally pull through, and the passion is what makes you go at it even harder, and keeps you up, at night.
That's
for
that's
an
true.
extra
That's true.
little hours. But basically, you learn to trust yourself and believe in yourself and have that assurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basically, with that, it made me realize that I'm the most important person in my life to make the best decisions.
Yep.
So it created that self-trust and that
Exactly.
self-reliance, right? And not only did it do that, but it made me assert myself to myself, which is the most important thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember I was working on my forex business, and I realized that this basically it gave me that spirit of independence, because I knew I was in full control of myself, right? And then it made me be able to discard the opinions of professionals, because I knew that it's like knowing myself, right? Knowing yourself, and you have a handle to it, right? So I studied my craft, and I knew I had a handle to my craft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to, just like I did with knowing myself, to take the rest of the information and all the popularity and all the knowledge and information from all the people who are experts,
Mm-hmm.
and just shut down the noise, because you need that period of closing off and just being alone. And then I was like, okay, this is my business, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to see if my philosophy of life works, right?
Yeah.
And basically, business ended up working, right? So I just wanted to point out the benefits of self-development in terms of it goes far beyond the personal level,
Yeah.
because
That's
it
true.
develops you into a person that you get to learn independence and a solid grip and full control over your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that literally transfers from self to business to it makes you a better person altogether, to a
Mhm.
family, to. So it's one skill that transfers to different aspects of your life. That is, I think, the most beneficial thing I could say about developing yourself and growing as a person.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm very much glad that you mentioned that, and yeah, so we've basically come to the end of today's episode,
Uh-huh.
and we hope that you will be able to get everything that you can get from this podcast and use this information to better yourself, because one day most of you are going to become parents, and this is like the best thing that you can give to your children.
Say that again.
Yeah, but like being self-aware and being aware of things is just one of the most helpful thing you can do for yourself and for your children. If you feel like you want, like if you are on a journey of personal development, you feel like it's too much, just remember that all the things that you were complaining about your parents not giving to you, and if you can incorporate that, you'll basically come to realize that you are the only person at this stage in your life who literally can give your children the best life and the best advice there is. But that's if you understand yourself, and if you can understand yourself, you'll be able to understand other people. And if you understand other people, that simply means that your interrelational skills is gonna improve in a way.
That's true.
Because
very important.
Obviously there's more work to be done, but we have to start somewhere. The basics are the most important thing. So thank you very much for tuning in, and then we'll see you again next week.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And know that this podcast is not complete until you check out part 2.
Yeah. It's not complete until you check part 2.
Yeah, don't miss part 2. Part 2 is where the meat is.
Yeah, let me leave you with this track that I don't love it, but it's a nice song. Okay. See you again next week, guys. Oh yeah, I'm